Well, we'd like to thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us. My name is Dennis Garino, and I'm with Oz Architects. Warren Hampton, also with Oz, and Rex Thompson. We will be facilitating this afternoon's focus groups, and we really appreciate you taking your time to be here with us today. We just want to start out by setting a few ground rules. We really primarily want you to have fun and enjoy yourself. This is really an exciting opportunity for Missoula to look at our current library, what it's doing well, and what it needs to become in the future. So what we'd really like to ask is that everyone is appreciative and cognizant of all the ideas that come out, and that we don't criticize each other for that. We ask that we respect everyone's time. At this point, every idea is good. Not every idea may eventually be implemented, but this is really an opportunity to dream about the public library. We ask that if you have a cell phone on, that you either turn it off or at least have it on vibrate, so that doesn't become a problem. And we'll ask that when one person is speaking, that we respect that. So with that, we're going to start the focus group number 1, and Warren will take it from this point.
Okay, welcome. Focus group number 1 is going to try and address some of the information, we call it information access functions of the library, things that include card catalog stations, the web alley in particular, that's probably where we'll start. The open lobby, Wi-Fi access, issues related to laptops, and we can also talk about some of the not really peripheral issues of those areas, but we can think a little bit about some of the noise issues that maybe some of these create. It might be best just to start with Web Alley. We've gotten comments in the past about that, and I think we can just open it up to any perceptions or ideas that any of you have about Web Alley. I understand that currently there are 24 computers in there. If anyone can correct me on that. I think Honor said there are 24 computers in there. If any of you use that area, have any thoughts, ideas, or concerns, please throw them out.
You're talking about
right across the hall.
Okay.
Yeah.
As an older person, if I come in, a very short period of time, and so I get the ones where you're either standing or you get up on a stool. At my age, it's difficult standing for a length of time, and it's difficult crawling up on a stool.
Okay.
Bad legs and knees.
Okay, good point. So improving, perhaps, what this leads to is the question in my mind: if we've got 24 computers, how do we decide what's an optimal number? How do we decide that there's enough? I'll give you an example. When the city of Minneapolis rebuilt their downtown library, their central library, they had 75 computers. In the new building, there is 300 computers. Amazing. And when I was there probably 2 years ago, practically every one of those was in use. It's a high demand, high use kind of thing. One of the questions would be, what do you think is a reasonable wait time? There's obviously got to be, we could have 240 computers, we could have 2,400 computers, but what is we can start the discussion by thinking about what's a reasonable wait time. You had a comment?
Mine's somewhat related
Okay.
to that. I'd like to see Web Alley not defined as in terms of one room in this building, but really public computers all over town, or wireless access in public spaces throughout the town. that I think what wireless has to offer means that we don't have to restrict ourselves to thinking only about a building. And that, for instance, 3 terminals in the mall or in other locations that are sponsored by the public library. I realize that would have issues regarding managing the terminals, would there have to be a person there to manage it? But I think in a more open way than just the building.
That's a nice idea, yeah.
The airport, for instance, to have a few kiosks with access.
There probably is
Bus
a,
terminal.
sure, there probably is a way to, you probably have seen these kiosks that are set up for web access and basically use a credit card or something, but there's probably another way to kind of control time access.
The Lifelong Learning Center at the university, forgotten what the name of the building is, next to the student union, has an open access. I think once when I tried to use it, it was restricted to university sites only. I'm not sure, but that's an example of a freestanding. You know, if the library measures its productivity in terms of usage, this would be a way of really boosting usage because many more people would have access all over town rather than having to drive to another to use it.
Could also be something that we could encourage, if it's the mall, for instance, it might be possible to encourage your individual store owners to sponsor that. So it's their public service, and really they're the ones that oversee it.
So a public-private partnership, or a hospital too.
Hospital.
Anyway, there's like waiting areas.
Yeah, clearly one of the issues that I think we all understand is that people come to the library to access a computer because they don't have one. So immediately, the thought is just provide Wi-Fi. Well, if you don't have a computer, Wi-Fi doesn't help you. So really it's an issue of having a computer, and I like that idea that it's in a different place.
But if you do have a computer that's portable and you're in a place where there is no Wi-Fi, then it doesn't even matter that you have a computer because you don't have the access. So providing Wi-Fi as well is another option. Perhaps in these locales there can be Wi-Fi for people who do have computers and then actual terminals for people who don't. Although this may be planned obsolescence because as more and more people get iPads or whatever in 10 or 15 years, there'll be maybe less demand. But in the interim.
Yeah, I think, there's always going to be that part of society that doesn't have a computer for economic reasons or whatever. And so as long as we're not handing out computers to everyone when they're born, there will always be people that don't have them. And that's, I think, one of the functions this library, places like it serve, is for those, it's called the universal access, or issues of information ownership kind of things. If you own a computer, you have access to the information, but if you don't own a computer, there's no window. So that's a great idea. I think the city itself, it'd be interesting, the city of Missoula, as many of them have begun to think about where to provide Wi-Fi access in the downtown. That would be a great start.
Yeah, and then in that case, then the room goes away. And perhaps there's just, the library has laptops they can check out, and you go anywhere in the library, and it isn't confined to a space.
I was going to say that I have an aversion to using that room. I feel like, a lab right or something, that it's everyone crowded together with their own. And my preference would be to have terminals sprinkled throughout the building. I realize that's harder to control for the person who's monitoring the timing or whatever. But I don't think it's very attractive to walk into a room where everyone's crowded in like that.
Well, I think if you've been, again, I'll refer back to Minneapolis, the computers are scattered basically not in a room, but in a main reference area. So you can go off to the side and there are bookshelves and counters and checkouts and everything. So it's not relegated to a specific room. University of Arizona, where I taught for a while, had what they call an information commons. And it was an underground area, and they had a massive amount of computers in there. It linked lecture halls to the main research library. So anyone, student, could come in and use that. Information commons is now, I think, a pretty exciting idea, something we could think about here.
Although we're using the word computer as though it's a generic term, and there are so many different types of computers, and maybe a variety of computers would also lend interest. Maybe very large screen for people who do graphics and don't have that at home, or sound systems.
Sure. We had a comment right in the back here. What, did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
It's okay.
One of the reasons they went to the web alley instead of having, they used to, some of the people will remember, they used to have a couple of rows of computers up near the reference desk in the area where now there's the kind of newspaper reading little lounge there. Was that the reference librarians who were up there were constantly answering questions about, turning on a computer and accessing software, which was really sort of taking them away from their job, which was helping people. I mean, they helped people access information, but it was a lot of the technical stuff. And that's why they moved it down here with a monitor, computer lab monitor type person who can help with more technical stuff. And so there was a reason for why they concentrated, as I recall. With regard to the number of stations, I suspect that if you add them, they will come, and there will be an ever-increasing usage that matches or exceeds the number of machines that are there. So I don't know if you can ever catch up with the demand. Do you know what if they have restrictions on, or I know they have restrictions, how long the restriction is for somebody to actually sit with a computer?
Here, I think it's an hour. Did I see 60 minutes? Okay. That seems like a lot. It seems like some of those ought to be restricted to 20 minutes or 15, so there's a quicker turnover.
For people who want to come in, just check their email, and
Yeah, when
and don't
people
want
are
to have
traveling,
to,
they run into it.
yeah, and they don't want to have to climb up on the stool.
Oh, God.
So if they would have some that were, staggered times, I mean, for just 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then others that were half hour or 45 minutes. But, I think it's not, if you made it so easy that anyone walks in and they immediately get on the machine, then that wouldn't last for very long, because then more people would come and you just, so there has to be some wait time.
That's what I was trying to get at.
So that people have to invest a little bit in
What do you think?
I was thinking 10, 15 minutes, and then once it starts to get beyond that, then you think about whether you need to add machines.
Eric?
Your idea about keep adding machines, they'll always get filled. I'm reminded of evidence in a lot of metropolitan areas around the country that when they keep enlarging roads, it doesn't diminish traffic. Eventually, it always fills, however large the highways and major thoroughfares get. Might be very parallel to that, no matter how many machines we get.
Reserve Street.
What's that?
Reserve Street. I mean, it's like...
Yeah.
Build them and they shall come. In answer to you, I don't know how you plan for this if given that premise, but in answer to your question, I guess I'm reminded upstairs, I seem to recall that there were two sets of machines at one point where it was an hour's length of use and then maybe something like 20-minute use machines, so there were two different lists with two different waiting times, which seemed workable. It seemed people could make a prediction of what they were going to need. And in answer to your question of waiting time, this is going to be really different for different folks with different tastes and patiences and lifestyles. At this point in my life, I think I'd be comfortable waiting a half an hour. think a lot of people, I'm projecting here, but I'm going to guess a lot of people might be, but there are an awful lot of people who would find a 10-minute wait onerous.
Yep.
See, that's why I'm thinking, to think that it has to be a machine in a stall, rather than a whole wall full of laptops that someone can just take one because the wireless is everywhere in the building, and sit and use it and put it back. And then there's no wait, and there's no keeping lists. It's just making sure no one walks out of the building with one.
Why would there be no
Because
wait?
you could have, they're not that expensive, especially the ones that do very minimal internet, you know?
Uh-huh.
So,
Space-wise, it would be.
yeah, and just if you need one, you take it and you sit at a table, and when you're finished, you put it back. It's not the days of IBM with computers that took up a whole room and people waiting months to use them, you know, it's so easy now.
So what would be an appropriate number of those computers that are available? Because if the building was wireless, a lot of people might just bring their own. And so you might actually not need a lot of laptops that could be checked out.
The building already is wireless. I mean, you can bring your own right now. In fact, you can sit sort of out in the parking lot we found and do it too. But there aren't machines like to check out, so if you don't have your machine, you're still in that position. And I don't see that there's any reason why it couldn't be both, is have some set of labs plus some checkout machines, plus have the wireless all over the building so that anybody who does have their own can bring that. And there's no reason why you can't do all three of those things simultaneously.
They actually have a long-range plan. It's in their long-range plan to provide, the library's long-range plan, to provide 5 laptops for checkout. And so that could be a really interesting test case, just to see how that works. And since it's in the long-range plan, I don't know how soon that would happen. It depends on funding. But the library has thought of that. It's in their plan, and we'll see how soon that gets implemented. You know, one of the interesting things about, I think you're right about thinking about, talking about computers too much. What we really should be talking about is an information interface. That's, you know, that's my iPod, it's my iPhone, it's my, who knows what we're going to run into. I can do practically everything on my iPod Touch that I can do on my computer in terms of accessing information on the web. But it's this big. And I don't have to haul around my laptop that's this big, and certainly I wouldn't haul around a desktop machine that would do that either. But when you think about information access, that could be telephone, you know, calling up and asking a question. It could be, well, to big dream, it could be some examples of iPads around the building that you could use around the building. It could be any form of allowing the public or individual to access an information network of any kind. So it's a really neat idea to think about getting away from locking to computers. I'll give you another anecdote. When I was at the University of Arizona teaching in architecture, we wanted students to buy, incoming students to buy laptops because so much of the program for us was based on computing. And my argument at the time was that laptops give you place-less computing for the students. They didn't have to be in the lab, hooked up to an internet or our network to do their work. Well, that worked for a while, except people realized that they could get a computer for less, a desktop computer for less, and so they became place-focused computing folks again, which was totally in reverse of what I was hoping for. And so I argued with them, you know, you've stuck yourself now with, you've saved, what, $500, $800, $1,000, but you're now stuck with coming into this lab to do your work. You could be at home, you could be in a bar, you could be anywhere, be at the mountain. And so there is that choice. And it was based on economics for a large point. But the nice thing about information interfaces is if they don't require you to be fixed in a certain place. Let's try something else here. Move along. How are the card catalog stations working? Do we have any input on that? Basically, a computer anywhere in the building has access to the card catalog system, so in a sense, you resolve the information interface, and that resolves access to card catalogs, or any sort of search engine. Do any of you have any experience with the card catalog stations that they have upstairs or wherever they happen to be?
Yeah, I think the less, you have to learn your way around the library. There's, finicky rules, like you grab a desk or a laptop, or you go to some station, go find one. If it's just gonna be there for a while, and it's very solid and it's the same thing, I think it serves its purpose that way.
Has anyone had any problem accessing information, the catalog system? I think most of us are getting familiar with those now. Of course, at my age, I grew up with the card catalog. And I'm happy to give that up, by the way. I miss the really nice wood cabinets. I don't miss the card. Because it's so much easier, right? The cards were never that much fun. They didn't look that great, so they weren't graphic images of any kind, and it's just so much easier now. Any other thoughts on the card catalog? Do there seem to be enough of them around? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Was there another thing?
I always do it from home.
Okay.
And then I put a book on hold. And what I appreciate is you have all of Montana and other resources to draw from. So that a particular library doesn't have to have a copy of the book you want, but within 2 or 3 days, it arrives in the library, and the notification system with email and pickup and the option to have it mailed to you. It's wonderful. Where I have difficulty is finding things to read that I want to read. I've talked to Honor Gray about this, that I'll read book reviews, and then I'll go online and see if we have the book. If not, I'll request that it's purchased or gotten from another library. But that's just, I'm just subject to, the Wall Street Journal and the Missoula, which I read. And Honor directed me to other resources in the catalog or on the web, on the Missoula Public Library web, which if you like this book, then you'll like this. But it seems as if places like Netflix are doing a much better job at helping clients find movies than libraries are doing helping clients find any of the media that's offered. And I would love to see an improvement in that. I think it could really increase reading. I mean, they talk about, having e-readers like iBook,
Kindle,
Kindle, and I've borrowed the one here that's available, the Sony e-reader, to experiment with it. And you can instantly download a book if you want it. But if you're not finding the books you want, it doesn't matter that you can instantly download it.
That's a good point.
So I actually think that's an area where there could be improvement, especially for children and adolescents. Adolescents even more so, because there's such a wealth of children's literature. But adolescents, I feel that reading drops off by middle school compared to elementary school, where the books are longer and harder and require more effort. and being able to match those kids with good books.
So we need a Pandora for the library, basically. I don't know enough about Pandora, but it's for an online music system, and it will make suggestions based on your patterns. That's what Google's going to end up. That's what they're doing. That's what Chrome does.
That's what
Amazon does. Yep. They all match your reading with you. Maybe you like this, and that's a great idea. I think that would be a great program for public libraries to have, because normally you'd kind of come to a public library and expect maybe there's an individual that has that kind of breadth of reading, but that would be reading probably a book every 5 or 10 minutes to be able to have that kind of basis. But
And also to know you well enough.
Yeah.
And then how many people to know.
Mhm.
It's absurd.
yeah, did you have a?
Yeah, I mean, Amazon figured it out, and I
Mhm.
get an email from them every day.
Yeah.
Since you bought this book, then you'll probably like this one too.
Mhm. People like
Obviously,
you
they're
got,
trying to-
yeah.
Obviously, they're trying to sell me books, but and sometimes it's really off the wall.
Yeah.
But there's somebody's written a program that can do that, so.
Yeah.
So perhaps the library should have more of a commercial mentality.
Yeah.
And just like Amazon trying to sell you books, the library's trying to get you to read books.
Get into a collaboration with some programmers and sell it to libraries around the world thereafter, and swimming in money.
Yep, there's that certainly has an entrepreneurial aspect to it.
It would be a demonstration city for.
Could be, yeah. That's a great idea. I think there's a library in Canada, I think it's in Richmond, that folks here have been up to visit. And part of their program up there is thinking about the users of the library as customers. And so they are very, almost like a retail institution. They're thinking, how do you serve your customer better? How do you let them access that information? So, see what else we got here. One of the issues, I mentioned the option that they're working towards in terms of laptops for checkout. Another issue, if any of you use laptops in the building, are there enough power outlets? Do you need more power outlets? Probably need more power outlets would be, the ideal answer. Any thoughts on that from the group?
They look happy up there along all the windows,
Mhm.
those big solid tables, and they're not crunched or
Mhm.
anything.
So the outlets should be where people want to set up in a study carrel or a table and that sort of thing.
How about stations where you can charge what you have if you don't have your power on with you? So there are these
Oh,
like mats where you can put your cell phone down and it automatically charges your cell phone, and have that as a service for people where you can charge your laptop if you came without your power cord, or your cell phone in like charging stations. I know
Yeah.
airports have those.
yeah. That's a good idea too.
And, but the other thing is not just how many outlets, but where's the energy coming from, and other ideas for, greener energy sources.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of a lame fault about sort of negative photos is I think about the coffee shops where when I go in there and I don't have a laptop, which is essentially the only way I ever go in, I feel like I'm an alien.
Because everybody else is
Everyone around me is surrounded, staring at their laptops, and, well, that thing. If there were to develop some sort of carrels or stations that were designed more specifically for laptops, which wouldn't welcome people sitting there with books, I wouldn't like that. Because no doubt people are going to increasingly be using laptops, and there's the special purpose you guys were talking about of loaning them out. So laptops will proliferate, but if we make it unfriendly to books, I will not like that.
Also, what I thought you were going to say is unfriendly to human interaction, because
Right.
everyone's so isolated. And here they're about community center, people getting together, and even all these social networking sites have more options for direct contact. So for instance, if eyes meet across the room and a couple wants to connect, sometimes this is a new concept. One of them hands a card to the other one can go on the internet and see and decide whether they want to be. But it's a way of taking it totally off the screen and it becomes more personal. So I'm thinking if there's a movement to more personal interaction, how do you help create that in the design of the space or in the programs? Because people are also anxious to connect and not just sit isolated. I miss the days in the coffee shop when people just talked to each other because they didn't have something to read or whatever.
You know, let's throw this out for discussion. If everyone in a reading group has a Kindle, let's say, and you're all reading the same book, and how do you think that works in a reading group when everybody's got a Kindle, and how would that be different or the same?
Is it really any different than people who are reading groups now? Because typically the reading groups I'm in, you go off and you read, in your bed at night, and then you come together at some point, and then you may have the book there for sort of reference, but you're not like simultaneously sitting together reading a Kindle or reading the book. So I don't think it'd be really all that different. It's just a different medium for doing the initial reading, but the discussion and all of that. They have the book discussion packages here, and they got a bunch of them now where you can set it up as a sort of a do-it-yourself reading group with discussion questions and multiple copies of the book, all in a nice handy bag. It's a really keen thing that a lot of people do.
Sure.
I have a question. I don't know anything about Kindles. Are they attached to the internet, or do they just have the book that you're reading?
Just the book, pretty much, yeah. So it's a standalone. You can walk anywhere and read your book, yeah.
I borrowed the Sony e-reader a year and a half ago from this library when I was going to Europe, and I wanted to have enough reading matter but not have the weight. And I ended up not taking it after experimenting with it for 2 weeks. I actually even borrowed books that I wanted to read and had them downloaded to the reader. And I found that because I couldn't plug it in on board the airplane, there was no adapter that came with it from this library. I'd have to buy them. To plug it in, the power would have run out, and I couldn't have had it for the duration of the flight. And I thought, isn't that ridiculous? You can't read a book if you don't have electricity. So that was one issue for me. The thing I did like about it is you could adjust the size of the type, and I found that I read much faster with the type being larger. But I couldn't mark pages like you can dog ear a page.
Dog earing is a little harder than
Well, no, but in
You can actually comment.
In the other books, in the other ones, like you can now
Comment.
bookmark or whatever a page or comment, but you couldn't do it on that particular one. So you can't really use them interchangeably. Each one is different. They have different benefits and.
I have one thought about the difference of Kindle. I mean, just imagining what it's like to read one, because I haven't never used one. But when I'm reading a book and I'm turning pages, I have a memory of where I saw a certain reference that I might want to go back to based on something I'm reading on a later page. And I look at that area of the page to find it. It's easier to find it that way. And I just imagine you can't do that with Kindle, right? Because it scrolls.
I think with the iBook, you can do a search function. So if you remembered a few words, you could search it and you could find it. But you can't do that on the other.
And you can highlight too. And I downloaded a book to my iPod Touch, and I haven't really gotten, not too excited about reading it on an iPod, but I noticed that you can touch it in a certain way and it'll bring up a little dialog box, and you can put notes in there. And so it's a little bit like writing in the margins, except you can do that as you go through the book, which I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. But you're right, you know, it's a different, I'm kind of like you, I have kind of a visual memory. I guess I'm an architect, I better have one. But it would be different to visualize a page that looks basically the same, one right after the other, unless there's a photo there somewhere.
But
That's interesting.
I downloaded guidebooks to the different countries in Europe that I was going to visit, thinking that would be so easy to just have this small item in my purse and have access to all the information I needed. And so they're wonderful uses.
Yeah. Are there any, talking about the information interface objects that we have in this building, are there noise issues that you've experienced that are associated with that activity?
With what activity?
The use of, well, I'll use the word of computer because that's what we have now, but are there distractions to you, any of you, that are caused through the use of someone else using a computer?
Yes.
Especially in Web Valley.
Web Alley, okay. Is that internally within the space or?
Mostly it's when people are at the 15-minute
Okay.
computers and they might be talking and laughing and carrying on
Okay.
or whatever, so it's kind of distracting.
Okay.
Is it the computer's noise or it's the people noise?
No, it's the people,
Oh, okay.
they'll
They
be
have the-
reading something and they'll be laughing about it and carrying on
Sure.
like it's a
Okay.
party or something.
Okay.
And like,
Good point.
it's very distracting.
Or we're traveling so far into the computer, you know, with the experience that someone can be so caught up in something, they're laughing so much. Or, I mean, we have all kinds of capacity to express ourselves.
Good point.
I was just going to support that idea because I do remember I have only once or twice used Web Alley as where it is now, but when it was upstairs, I did notice there was noise of people, I guess combination of the things you're talking about, and that did get to be an annoyance, which is, I guess, one argument for having it in one constrained area.
And also, if you have more than one person, say, at a computer, one will be sitting and one will be right there, but they'll talk and they'll talk real loud, and so it's sort of distracting.
Good point.
Is there a separate area for children to use computers?
There is here, yeah.
It's in the children's area?
It's up over here, yeah.
But I find
Please.
that to be true in general at the
Well,
library.
absolutely,
Because people are not
sure.
discouraged from just speaking
Mhm.
at regular levels.
Okay, good point. I guess in that sense, reading a book or working on a computer is the same kind of situation. It's a focused, for the individual, it's a focused activity, and sound distractions, other sound, unpleasant, clearly is going to affect that concentration aspect.
Maybe the library needs silent zones, like reading areas where you must be silent, and computer
Community.
areas that are silent.
Yep, yep. Please.
I also noticed, also some people will come in and they'll be like listening to music on their like iPad, like iPod or whatever, but they'll have it so loud that everybody in the room can hear it, and I'm like, come on, turn it down.
But that's society today. I'm from the older generation, and believe me, I just even hate to go out and eat in a restaurant anymore. You used to be able to go and talk to the person across the table, and you can't even do that anymore. People are on their cell phones. They have their headsets on, like this gentleman said, and we live in a very noisy society, and every place you go, they have piped-in music, and most of the music I don't want to listen to.
We can be glad that some of them are not bringing their automobile stereos in with them.
Isn't that the truth? You get that at traffic lights.
You know, it flashed that some of you are old enough to remember Get Smart, the television series, and the cone of silence would come down. That's what we need, the cone of silence. Please.
There was, one of the things that I mentioned at the last gathering is that we were up in Vancouver at the library up there. The main library is just huge, but they have all these kind of different areas, nooks and crannies, and for different purposes. And so, you know, if you have enough room, which we don't have enough room, you can do stuff like having areas where, you know, this is just for reading and quiet, and areas where if you want to work in a group and you know, kids working on a project or, you know, whatever. We don't have the luxury here because of this space, but that's a possibility.
This version, yeah.
Do you have any indication, I'm reading the figures off of this card, that the number of people coming in to the library, are the majority of them using computers? I noticed that the number of items that are checked in per hour here.
It's a
Do you
lot.
have any figures on what the computer use is, the volume of people using computers?
I think they do. We don't have it right now that I could give you, but it's a heavily used, well, I think we all knew that. It's heavily used. There are longer waiting times than they would like to have. Right now it's a high demand. We need to get those numbers and figure that out. See what.
Because
Yeah.
you have a large number of people coming in and returning items per hour.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot
But
of.
they can't rent out a laptop here in the library.
Not yet.
Okay, so if you do that, you're going to have a huge increase then, right?
Yeah, the hope is that, I didn't see a timeline on that, but they talked in the long-range plan of having laptops available. And I think the notion was to start at 5 and see where that goes. And again, that's probably waiting on a grant to be able to do that. Again, that's one of those items we'd like to see done sooner than later because, wow, that tells you a lot of things about how people would use computers. There's a key issue here that since we've got a small group, it's kind of fun to throw this idea out there, question out there. We've done some research and we're looking at a study that was done for the city of Boulder, Colorado, for their library. And the really interesting thing about how they went about talking to some of their stakeholders, and probably the public, is they asked them the question, if the library wasn't here, how would you deal with your information access needs? You think of the library as providing information or information access. How would you meet those needs if the library was not here? Yeah.
Well, we're fortunate here to have an alternative in the university. Pretty good library there.
Yep.
But I think most people, in fact, most of my students their preference is to use the internet and, you know, Google stuff and Wikipedia and all that other stuff.
I think if the library wasn't here, I would invent it. Because I just depend on it so much.
Cool.
It's nothing like the internet. And I don't like to go to the university library. I mean, even if that were an alternative in this imaginary problem.
So from your standpoint, you can't do without it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Well, of course, I turn to the web, but there are limits to what you can find there, the things you can access, and there's nothing like browsing through some hard print things that, but you know, that stirs for me another question. I don't know if we want to diverge into this, is I'm wondering about the future generationally. So many students today can't seem to get the idea of searching for any information in any other way than web searching and all its convenience.
Yeah.
That putting down the web to look at other resources is just foreign to most young adults, little and younger now. And so I wonder what impact that's going to have in a couple of decades for libraries.
There's the issue of, I guess it's serendipity, just discovery. And you can't just discover, really, on the web right now, although you can begin to, you know, Google has that I'm feeling lucky today kind of button. But there's something I like, again, I'm old-fashioned, and going through the library and touching things. And wow, I didn't know about that, and that leads me to somewhere else. But right now, That's a very good point. There is a physical, well, it is serendipity. It's the simple discovery of something without intent. And that's, as a creative person, that's how you become most creative. When you're not looking for something and you stumble on it, that's where creativity starts.
That happens on the internet, though. You stumble upon things all the time.
You can.
It's not just in real life.
You can.
But just regarding that question, where would you get your resources? I'm thinking of like Fahrenheit 451, all
yep.
the books were burned and then books become scarce, or it's hard to get books for free or a little bit of money and the library disappears. And how people might trade books amongst themselves or buy used books at the book exchange or on the internet. And it would be a very different environment if you didn't have a library.
There's another movie I saw in the last year where, again, the same, I don't think it was 451, but books were outlawed. And so there was this renegade camp where these individuals were, and they had memorized entire books. And that's that 451?
Yeah, that was 451.
Okay.
By
And so it's kept in individuals rather than
Right.
on a server, yeah.
My daughter's student at Stanford, and she just told me this morning that she signed up for as a student, free shipping from Amazon on used textbooks. So obviously Amazon's going after this market if they're offering free shipping. And she said, isn't that great? I don't have to go to the bookstore anymore, because remember what going to the bookstore in the beginning, hours of waiting online and the high price of the books and all of that. And all of a sudden, all she has to do is just enter her books, and in a few days, they're all there waiting for her. So the world really is changing the distribution and the impact on the library. I mean, we have to think about how that impacts the library and what they hold in the collection. The population I'm concerned about is the people who never or seldom come to the library. Because it's as though you're already speaking to the converted, the people who have a newsletter. How about all those people who never come to the library, who wouldn't even know a card catalog if you showed it to them, or to know an author's name, just to even request that order? What's being done for them to make them users of the library?
And that was another question that was in this survey, is how do you reach those folks who don't use the library? How do you encourage them to use the library's facility? Yeah.
I'm a fan of the CD music here, and whenever I see, I like reggae music, I like all kinds of music, and whenever I see people, I say, Missoula Library has a tremendous
Collection.
selection on reggae, any kind of music. All you have to do is get a card,
And it's free.
Yeah. And just to cover up one thing was that Jon Stewart, the Daily Show, was doing a thing with with Beck, and Beck was saying, "Well, we go to your library, right?" And then Jon Stewart made a comment, jokingly that, "Well, that's socialism, isn't it?" I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
Because it's a public service,
Yeah. So there's word of mouth, basically. That's one way you encourage people, that you have interest, and it's kind of an evangelism, I suppose. But, well, making it more accessible, right? If the library services were available at the mall or the grocery store or City Hall, suddenly it's there.
But I'm also thinking people who don't read, then they may come for the movies. Or people who are isolated, like mothers with young children, would come for the children's reading hour just to get out of the house. Or I know the library has a service for people in nursing homes where they bring books to the nursing homes. So I do think we should look at programming.
Well, if the movies that are very popular, and I'm sure they do this to some extent, had a component where if you're interested in this topic that this movie is covering, then read these books. This is a particular issue. that they raise here, you need to read this stuff.
They bundle it.
You can bundle it, yeah. And I love this, you know, these cards.
Yeah.
Think more.
Good luck.
Um,
What that spurs for me is, I'm thinking, yeah, one of the answers might be fattening up our entertainment segments of the library. Let's face it, America's an entertainment culture. Entertainment is big business, and so movies and music might bring people in. Well, we got here early, and I picked up a periodical while we were waiting. That was a new discovery for me, one of those
serendipity, yeah?
yeah, serendipity moments. Maybe people who are here for some of the entertainment may have moments like that with, God forbid, print. But there is a reality that there are a lot. I was speaking with somebody, doesn't matter where, I guess, who just happened to mention that he never reads. Has some education, was reasonably well spoken, just never. I was making small talk and mentioning something, a book, and he mentioned he never reads in general. So how do you reach people who just don't read? That's a real challenge.
But why do we need to? I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? If they don't want to read, this is America. Right? They don't have to read.
Yeah, you can be as stupid as you want, I guess.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're stupid.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But there's this issue, there's an interesting concept that I remember from 10 years ago at the university. It's called edutainment. Basically, it's the marriage of educational aspect with something that's entertaining, right? Edutainment has the aspect of, you know, if it's a computer game or something, that there's something you're learning in that process, that it's both, it captures you probably from the entertainment side, but it gets you some thinking, or it gets you some knowledge somehow out of that. And that's kind of where I think our society is going, is the edutainment side of things.
Well, it works for me. I've learned a whole lot from watching West Wing and Michael Clayton and Syriana. I mean, that's the way I learn about those issues. I can't get it from reading the Wall Street Journal.
Sure.
I just don't have that facility.
And that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, so what's the problem?
Well, it's not a problem. But it would be interesting if the library found a way to, for instance, I read a book. Now I'm an expert. I say this all the time, but it's the same book I've read over and over again. So, Building Libraries for the 21st Century. There's a library in Hawaii, in Honolulu, and it's associated with the university. And they made the point of having a television there as you come in. It's a media center. And so not only can you come there from other parts of the university and watch a particular program, broadcast stuff, either cable or broadcast, but as you're walking by, you can spend 5 minutes and check up on the latest news, or there might be something on the History Channel that captures your attention. And in that setting, what it allows them to do, which I'm not sure they do, is that they can connect to that. If they're projecting, or they've got a show on from the History Channel, they could link you pretty easily to all these books that relate to that, or to a magazine article. But you get, and this is the big jump for a library, you bring the media into the library and you make use of it. Interesting concept. Interesting.
I visited a bookstore last month. It's a private bookstore opposite Harvard University. It's called Harvard Bookstore, but it's a private bookstore. And they have a machine that can print any book you want that's in public domain. So you give them a title that's out of copyright, and within a few minutes before your eyes, I have a picture on my cell phone of the machine if anyone wants to see it, it prints cuts the paper, glues a binding, puts a cover, and it's $8.
It's a deal.
$8?
Yes, any book.
Wow.
Any book. It does it, it's like a gumball machine. You sit there and you say you want this.
Of course, it's been printed on an old mimeograph machine.
Yeah, it's purple.
No, it's a laser. It's so fast.
Oh, that's neat.
And there was a book my husband wanted, and it's out of print. And I thought I would surprise him with it. But it's still under copyright, so I couldn't get it.
Yeah.
But this is just wonderful. I mean, I think we're like moving in that direction for books that don't have a high circulation.
Do you know about the Gutenberg Project? That gives books that are out of print and out of, copyright for free.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
Of course, you have to download it yourself.
it's digital though.
No, you print it. Well, that's what I do.
Oh, you print it on just your printer at home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Neat. Neat.
So I think, it's so challenging to think about the future of the library when you see all of this on the horizon.
Well, the thing I think about, the actual benefit of the library reminds me of a book called Megatrends. It was written, 20 years ago by John Naismith. And his point was that as we move into a more and more technological society, high tech, we're also having to develop very high touch things to
Balance.
yeah, to complement that, all that living in our head. And what I like about the library is I'm here in a room with real people and we're talking and we're sitting on chairs, and that's part of that serendipity. You never know who you're going to see at the library, see people you haven't seen in a long time, see people that you never would see anywhere else.
Let's, one last question. We need to move on to the next group. The big question that's out there and that I'm pondering is, will libraries go away?
No. No.
No? No? Why not?
Because it's like you were saying, if we didn't have the library, then you'd lend books to each other and you'd go to the used bookstore and eventually you'd just have a library. You'd say, let's just have a library.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I just don't. I think there's always going to be people who want to read, and whether digital or in book form, they're going to always want to read. There's always going to be people, of course, coming here for movies, CDs that they can't find anywhere else.
Will the two generations be doing that?
See, I'm thinking the library could end up being one person sitting in a tiny room.
The Wizard of Oz.
Some kind of electronic database that
Great-
everyone
great waiting
accesses at
times.
home.
Yeah.
In the future, it could be
Yeah.
digital.
I've argued too, from the academic side, that do we really need architecture? Because this room could project any sort of, with the correct equipment, is getting to the point that you could project a scene on this wall. And basically, we'd never have to leave a room because we could be...
The holodeck.
Well, it's the holodeck, exactly what it is. Because you never have to... The holodeck is an ugly room like this with a bunch of grids on it. You could have any experience over any time period and be in any place and at any time. And so it takes us back to, I think, the question of us as social beings and our biological makeup. I think what's going to save the library over time is that people want to be with other people. Right? I think that's bingo, and that leads us into group 3, really. The library becomes a community center. The community center is where people meet and greet and talk to each other and interact. And that's what the library provides.
Well, I just want to add
Sure.
that I think it isn't just that I want to be around people, but I really do like to be around special spaces. And this really does feel like a special space. We were recently in the Salt Lake City Library, where there is an art gallery, and there are also stores. It actually has something of an aspect of a shopping mall in a way.
The entry.
The entryway, right. And it is just a real, it says that library says you are in a special place. And there are many art galleries that also say, like the Missoula Art Museum. It says, you are in a special place. And it's, to me, it's worth it to actually, walk right over and be in those special places.
Here's a quote from the one book I've read in my life. It has to deal with libraries. Libraries in the future. The library is that place that provides, well, I'll just read it from here. And it's part of a bigger sentence, but it's the sense of place that a library gives its users. That's what I think is a library.
Also, I think it has a civic function because it is a public institution. And I'm surprised that the city and county government they haven't figured out a way to utilize the library more for as a public information tool or as a way of getting support for community ideas. And then I'm also thinking how the library means something different to different groups. It's especially important to homeschoolers. Homeschool families practically camp out at the library several times a week. And it might be worthwhile to look at the different populations who use or could use the library and what it means to them.
Sure. Let me just read this little short paragraph here. Again, from the one book I've read in my life about libraries. Library users often assume the library to be the repository of all information. That is, you go to the library and you expect to find an answer to whatever question you have or issue. Interesting. Here's some other quotes. Voices are rising to reassert the library's primacy as a preserver of accumulated knowledge, as an information provider, and as a social institution. This reasoning contains certain themes. The continued relevance of the library mission, providing service to the information have-nots, which was what we were talking about earlier, access versus ownership of information sources, the need for facility and organizational flexibility to meet uncertain and changing future, and the opportunities to be gained by partnering with other agencies. That paragraph for me really talks a lot about what libraries for the 21st century would be about. So stick around if you're interested. We'll try to get into some of this in the other topics, but thank you. Thank you. Sure.
I actually wanted to add a comment at the beginning because we went so fast or
Sure.
whatever, but I know specifically why I come to the library. When the job service is full, and there's a lot of people that do go there and it gets full real quickly, I come here to fill out job applications. I come here to look online to find jobs, and an hour is not enough for me. I need more time.
Okay.
It's not enough time for me.
Okay. On this back table back there, if any of you are leaving, there's some little sort of pinkish orangish information cards. You are welcome to take those. If we missed any comment and you have to leave, there's some yellow sheets back there. Please feel free to fill those out. We'll take about a 5-minute break and then jump into our next group, which is nice segue, the public meeting space side of things. So please stick around if you're interested.